Hello, everyone. Good morning. Once again, huge thanks to Kaveen, Arnav, and Envirocast for having me. A little bit about myself. My name is Avyay. I'm a sophomore that goes to James Clemens High School in Madison, Alabama. And to start off, I want all of you to ponder about this question. How much of human opportunity is determined long before effort or ambition ever enter, or even enter the picture? One of the clearest places that we see this question play out is in how we understand poverty. So when we talk about poverty, we usually talk about income or education or access to opportunity. Those things matter substantially. But here's the reality. There's another factor that quietly shapes all of them, and we almost never talk about it. And that factor is soil, the backbone of prosperity and the basis for life. Not money, not education, not location, and not access to resources. Soil. Born into favorable circumstances, I didn't grow up thinking about soil. In fact, most of us don't. Soil is invisible until something goes wrong, until crops fail, until food gets expensive, until certain communities are always stuck relying on whatever food happens to reach them. However, I had an epiphany after noticing a pattern that felt uncomfortable but undeniable. In places of prosperity, the soil is rich, it's tested, it's protected, it's supported by resources, technology, and infrastructure. In places with wealth, the ground itself is an asset. But in many high poverty areas, the soil tells a different tale. It's depleted, polluted, and more often than not, unusable. And that singular difference shapes everything. It shapes what kind of food can be grown. It shapes whether or not food can be grown at all. And ultimately, it shapes who gets access to fresh, healthy nutrition and who doesn't. This isn't an accident. It's the result of decades of industrial zoning, environmental neglect, redlining, disinvestment, and social stratification embedded in policy, planning, and political power. When factories are placed near certain neighborhoods, the soil absorbs heavy metals. When land is ignored for generations, nutrients disappear. Once soil is damaged, recovery can take decades. Decades a population may not be able to afford. It might be easy for us to tell communities to just grow their own food. However, we're often ignoring the ground beneath their feet, and moreover, the ground's ability to facilitate plant life. And that's where hydroponics comes in. Hydroponics is a method of growing plants without soil. Instead of dirt, plants grow in water enriched with nutrients. The roots are supported, the plants get exactly what they need, no more and no less, and this growth happens in a controlled environment. At first, that might sound like a niche science experiment, something futuristic, something expensive. But what this really beholds is something much bigger. The thing about hydroponics is that it removes one of the oldest assumptions in human history, that fertile land is a requirement for civilization. For thousands of years, civilization has been built around agriculture. And we see that where the soil was good, societies flourished. Where it wasn't, people struggled. Wars were fought over land, borders were drawn around it. And suddenly, here's a system that says maybe land quality doesn't get to decide who eats anymore. Hydroponic systems use significantly less water than traditional farming because water is actually recirculated instead of being lost to runoff. They take up less space because plants can be grown vertically. And because the environment is controlled, crops can be grown year round, regardless of climate. But the most important impact isn't efficiency, it's equity. By removing dependence on land quality, hydroponics eliminates a barrier that has quietly reinforced agricultural success across generations. With hydroponics, food can be grown in urban neighborhoods, in abandoned warehouses, on rooftops, in schools, in places where the soil is toxic or non existent. And just the sheer impact of this idea is powerful. Because once we understood that, learning about hydroponics didn't feel like enough. Because knowledge without action has a shelf life. Eventually, it just turns into guilt. So, me and my friends asked a simple question: what could we actually do with this? That question became Farm to Trade. Farm to Trade is an initiative we undertook to educate students about hydroponic systems and their role in creating fairer food systems. But from the beginning, we knew we didn't just want to explain how hydroponics works. You can easily Google that. What we wanted to explain was why it matters, why food systems are tied to justice, why innovation isn't neutral, why who gets access to technology matters just as much as the technology itself. We focused on helping students understand that food insecurity isn't just about hunger, it's about power, it's about control over resources, and it's about whether communities have the tools to feed themselves with dignity. Now, here's the part where we hit a bump in the road. We were underclassmen. We didn't have funding, nor experience, nor credentials. But what we had was awareness and the willingness to act on it. And honestly, starting Farm to Trade was messy. There were many setbacks. There were moments when it felt pointless, when it felt like we weren't doing enough, when we wondered who would take us seriously. But what we ultimately realized was best expressed by former President Barack Obama, who once said, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And all we needed was that motivation to keep going and a little bit of support along the way. And change starts by recognizing impact. Change doesn't start Change doesn't start with perfection. It starts with participation. Through Farm to Trade, we focused on what we could do. We started conversations. We applied for grants. We talked to other students about how food justice and innovation intersect. We encouraged people to support hydroponics initiatives locally and globally. And something interesting happened. Momentum doesn't require scale. It requires belief. One of the most powerful things hydroponics has taught me is resilience, sorry. Plants don't stop growing because conditions aren't perfect. They adapt. They find new ways to access what they need. They respond to constraints with creativity. And that's a lesson for us. You don't have to be an expert to notice what's unfair. You don't have to be a policymaker to ask why things are the way they are. You just have to pay attention and keep going when the solution isn't within reach. Once people started seeing food systems differently, they started asking better questions, like where does my food come from? Why is fresh food harder to access in some neighborhoods? Who decides how land is used? Education creates curiosity. Curiosity creates engagement. That's when we realized that Farm to Trade wasn't just about hydroponics. It was about challenging societal norms. Hydroponics challenges the assumption that soil is essential for agriculture. Farm to Trade and any other student-led initiative in the world challenges another assumption that students are too young to make a difference. Innovation isn't solely about technology. It's about mindset. It's about looking at inequality and refusing to accept it as inevitable. Because the future of food doesn't have to be limited by the soil beneath us. It can be shaped by innovation, by empathy, and by people who decide that inequality is a problem worth solving. So today, I want to leave you all with a challenge. Think differently about opportunity. Think differently about food. Think about where it comes from. Think about who has access to it and who doesn't. Support sustainable systems, share what you learn, and most importantly, don't underestimate the power of starting small. Thank you. A sustainable future awaits us.
Yeah, thank you, Avyay. That was an incredible speech. I think that definitely resonates with all of us here and our sustainable goals as well. And I think some questions are flooding into the chat. So, Kevin, if you could just pin Ethan Hatif's. Ethan Hatif is asking, can you please explain a bit more on how soil degradation links back to redlining, like you mentioned, and other historical policies?
Yeah. So, um, like, like redlining was used as a tool for social stratification. Because essentially what it did was it concentrated factories and waste sites near like poorer neighborhoods. So this led to soil that absorbed heavy metals and toxins. And so basically it rendered the land for these communities inefficient. Um, and since because soil recovery can take decades that a population can't afford, these policies create like a barrier to fresh nutrition that we're now using hydroponics to bypass.
Okay. Now let's go into the second question from Steven. What are the biggest limitations and fail points when trying to scale hydroponics into urban environments and I think more environments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So really, the biggest limitation is the high upfront costs for the equipment and like the constant need for reliable access to electricity and clean water. Um, like I understand it can be viewed as expensive, which makes it difficult for underfunded communities to like adopt this form of agriculture. But by focusing on like water recirculation systems, we can overcome like the the physical space and water constraints. So then it just becomes a question of financial capability. So
Yeah, so I think Ninja's asking another question in the chat. Ninja's asking, how do you think the youth can best reach out to policymakers slash legislators to advocate for food equity and presenting hydroponics as a feasible alternative?
Uh, Sorry, hold on. Um, so the youth needs to present like hydroponics as a sustainable solution to to other forms of agriculture that aren't sustainable. So by collecting data from initiatives such as like Farm to Tray, students can provide legislators with proof that community-led technology um, can overcome land barriers. So the goal really is to show that we aren't just asking for help. We're presenting a future-proof model for that deserves legislative backing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it really connects to the diplomatic aspect of what we're really talking about. And I think it also connects back to the sustainable goals that you were talking about and how we should all strive to actually help the future become a more sustainable place for not only us, but for our future generations to really strive in. So I think that's the last of the questions, unless there's more coming in.
I think that should be it for right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, wait, there's
this
another one
I think
from,
this is very similar to a previous one that was talking about limitations.
yeah.
Okay. So I think that was it. Thank you so much, Avyay.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
made
no
some
problem.
great points about hydroponics and sustainability. I think that resonates with a lot of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Have a
great
nice
day.
day.
Bye.
Bye.
There is always an opportunity to contribute to the discussions that we have at EnviroCast Geo. If you are interested in attending or even speaking at a future conference, learn more at geo.envirocast.org. We're excited to hear your insights.